Hello friend, this is Jubair Khan and you are watching Joravi Nursing online classes. So today we are going to see the diagnostic tests and procedures related with cardiology. So what are the diagnostic procedures are there in cardiovascular system? So we will see this. So let us start the video. Before starting the video, if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe it, like it and share this video to others. So let us start the video. So first diagnostic procedure is cardiac markers. So why we use the cardiac markers? So it is the used to identify the MI, myocardial infarction. It is used to diagnosing of the myocardial infarctions. So what are the cardiac markers are there? So CKMB is there, troponin is there, myoglobin also is there. So these are the cardiac markers. So in that CKMB, one is CKMB creatinine kinase, MB for heart muscle, one more is there CKMM, this is for skeletal, MM for skeletal muscle, and one is CKBB, this is for BB for brain tissues. So there are three types of creatinine kinase, one is CKMB, CKMM and CKBB. So BB for brain, MM for skeletal muscle and MB for heart muscles. So creatinine kinase myocardial muscles. So an elevation is the value indicate myocardial damage. When it is elevated, so it is indication of myocardial muscle damage. So an elevation occurs within hours. So this occurs within hours and peaks at the 18 hours. So it will lead to the peaks at the 18 hours. An acute ischemic attack, when acute ischemic attack is there, it will elevated within hours. Within hours mean after myoglobin, it is the main enzyme, it will elevated frequently. So it will elevated and it will reach at the peak at 18 hours. The normal value of CKMB is 2 to 6 nanogram per ml in male. So in male how much it will be? It will be 2 to 6 nanogram per ml in male. So in male 2 to 6 and in female 2 to 5. Okay. So now coming to, so this is, it will reach on the peak at 18 hours. Then coming to troponin. So troponin consists three proteins. Okay, so they are, troponin is the isoenzymes. These have three types of isoenzymes. Troponin C will be there, cardiac troponin will be there, and cardiac troponin I and T. So these three proteins will be there: troponin C, troponin I and troponin T. So troponin I especially has a high affinity for myocardial injury. So troponin is the specific cardiac markers. So this is the specific cardiac marker. Which is the specific cardiac marker? That is troponin I. So troponin is the specific cardiac markers. It rises within 3 hours. So within 3 hours it will rise. So after myoglobin it will rise troponin I. Then after troponin I only this CKMB will elevated. So first myoglobin, then troponin, then CKMB. So first myoglobin will elevate, then troponin will elevate, then only CKMB. But one more thing is there, it will persist up to 7 to 10 days. It will be persist up to 7 to 10 days, whereas in CKMB will be up to 7 days only. Up to 7 days only it will be there, and myoglobin will be up to few hours. Now coming to normal values of troponin. So troponin values low with the troponin I being, it will be less than 0.3 nanogram per ml. So the normal value is, it should be less than 0.3 nanogram per ml or 0.03 microgram per liter, and troponin T's level is 0.2 nanogram per ml. So I should be less than 0.3 and T should be less than 0.2 2. Okay, so thus any rise can indicate myocardial cell damage. If anyone is elevating troponin I or T, so it will suggest that it is a myocardial cell damage. Okay, so most specific in that is troponin I. So I is most specific. Okay, or if we say the most sensitive and accurate, so most sensitive will be the troponin T. Troponin will be the most sensitive. Okay, but more specific will be the troponin I. And myoglobin. Now coming to myoglobin. Myoglobin is the oxygen binding protein found in the cardiac and skeletal muscles. So the level rise within 2 hours. So first starting itself within 2 hours myoglobin level will be increased, and after 7 hours it, however, it is not cardiac specific. So if myocardial infection is there and you are going to check after 7 hours, so it is not specific. Okay, so the main thing is it will elevated. So first the cardiac marker which is elevated, that is myoglobin. So this is the main important question, which cardiac marker first elevated, so that is myoglobin. After myoglobin, troponin. After troponin, CKMB only. And the question comes, which is the cardiac marker will be available for highest days, that is troponin. Troponin I, that will be available 7 to 10 days. Okay, so this is the questions. Now coming to complete blood counts. So in complete blood count, what we will see, so there will be red blood cell decrease in the rheumatic heart disease. So when rheumatic heart disease will be there and infective endocarditis is there, and increased condition characterized by inadequate tissue oxygenation. So what will happen when red blood cell count decreases in the rheumatic heart disease and infective endocarditis, and increase in the condition characterized by inadequate tissue oxygenation. So red blood count will be decreased in the rheumatic heart disease and infective endocarditis, and increases in the condition, it will be increased in the condition which inadequate tissue oxygenation. When tissue oxygenation is less, then it will be increased. Now coming to white blood cell count. So white blood cell count, that means WBC, when it will increases when any infection or inflammatory diseases of heart is there, it will be increases. After MI, because of large number of WBC cells are needed to dispose the necrotic tissue resulting from the infarction. So after the MI it will be increased. Why it will be increased? Because after MI it is needed. Why? To dispose the necrotizing, whatever necrotized tissues are there, to necrotized tissue is there, for treating that tissues it is needed. Okay, for dispose that tissues it is needed. So after MI WBC will be elevated. Okay, an elevated hemoglobin level can result from vascular volume depletion. So when hemoglobin level will be elevated, can result from the vascular volume depletion. So vascular volume depletion is there, so it will be lead to the elevation of hemoglobin level. And decreased hemoglobin and hemoglobin level indicate anemia. When anemia is there, so it is indication of decreasing the hemoglobin and hematocrit level. Blood coagulation factors. So blood coagulation, what are the coagulation factors are there? So increase in coagulation factor can occur during and after MI. So when MI is there, that time what will happen, coagulation factor it will be increased. So what it will lead? It will lead the risk for thrombophlebitis. So when thrombophlebitis is there and formation of clots in the coronary arteries. So this is a very important point is there. Okay, so let us understand this point. What will happen in this when MI is there? Okay, so when MI is there, so it will, MI patient has risk for clotting. So when this risk for clotting will be there, that means thrombophlebitis it can be there, or clots will form and it will load to the coronary artery. So coronary artery again it will be blocking, and it is also have a great risk for pulmonary embolism. Okay, so clot will be formed and it will lose to the pulmonary circulation. Then client will have a risk for pulmonary embolism. So it may happen. So this question comes in MI patients, what is the main risk is there? So that will be the pulmonary embolism. So pulmonary embolism risk is there in the client. So pulmonary embolism can occur. So it will load to the that clause will lose to the in pulmonary circulation. So for that we need to provide the what some there will be a medication like LMNOP, like Lasix and all. So it will, and some thrombolytic anti-thrombus medication we need to provide. Now coming to serum lipids. So what are the serum lipids are there? So lipid profile we have to measure, like serum cholesterol, triglyceride and lipoprotein levels we have to measure. So there will be a one LDL protein, one HDL. Okay, so LDL and HDL will be there. So LDL is low density lipoprotein and HDL high density lipoprotein. One is, another one is VLDL. One more will be there, VLDL. So very low density lipoprotein will be there. So these we need to monitor. So the lipoprotein LDL value should be less than 30 mg per dl. So this we will study in the chapter 10, all lipoprotein and all. Now coming to homocysteine. Homocysteine, what is do? It elevated levels may increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. When homocysteine is elevated, so it is the risk factor of cardiovascular disease. So what is the normal value of homocysteine? It should be 0.54 to 1.9 mg per liter or 4 to 14 micromole per liter. Okay, so it should be 0.54 to 1.9 mg per liter. Okay, it should be in liter. Now coming to highly sensitive C-reactive protein, HSCRP. So HSCRP, what is it? It detects the inflammatory process such as that associate with the development of atherothrombosis. That mean it is a highly reactive protein. In when it will be detected, it will be detected when inflammatory processes occurs, where it will be occur in the thrombus formation in the arteries. Okay, atherothrombosis. A level less than 1 mg per dl considered low risk. When its level is less than 1 mg per dl, so patient is on low risk. If it is greater than 3 ml per dl, so patient is on high risk. Okay, when less than 1, low risk, greater than 3 mg per dl, it is high risk. Now coming to microalbuminuria. Microalbuminuria means a small amount of protein in the urine. When a small amount of protein is coming in the urine, so has been a marker of endothelial dysfunction. So it is the marker of endothelial dysfunction in the cardiovascular disease. So the endothelium is there, its dysfunction, it is the marker of for dysfunction of endothelial tissues. So it will be indicator of the endothelial dysfunction in the cardiovascular disease. Okay, so microalbumin, it mean a small amount of protein in the present in the urine. Okay, so this we need to see. Now electrolytes. So what are the main electrolytes? So potassium is the very important electrolyte. Okay, potassium. So potassium, if it is high also, it is high also, that mean something problem. If low, then also something problem. When it is hypokalemia, so hypokalemia, what it will cause? So hypokalemia causes increased cardiac electrical instability, ventricular dysarrhythmias and increased risk of digoxin toxicity. So when hypokalemia is there, when hypokalemia is there, so what it will do? So cardiac electrical activity is there, that will be changed, instability will be there in cardiac activities, and ventricular dysrhythmias will be there, like ventricular tachycardia and all. So it will be there. And increased risk for deoxygenicity when potassium is less, and potassium is less and patient is getting digoxin, and potassium is less, then digoxin toxicity may occur. So this is the very important question here. So hypokalemia is lead to digoxin toxicity. Okay. In hypokalemia, the electrocardiogram shows the flatten and inversion of T wave. So in electrocardiogram, there will not be a T wave like this. So it will be like how much? How it will be? It will be like this. So there won't be any T wave. Okay. So and at last there will be a U wave. Okay. And ST depression will be there. So there will be ST depression, U wave will be present, and T wave inversion will be there. So T wave won't be like this. T wave will be like this. Then one U wave will come. Okay. And ST depression will be there in hypokalemia. Now coming to hyperkalemia. So hyperkalemia causes asystole and ventricular dysarrhythmias. So it will, when hyperkalemia is there, it will cause the asystole. So remember, this is the very important point here, which will lead to the asystole. If hyperkalemia is there, so it will lead to the asystole. These all are questions only. Whatever we are discussing, this each line, each word is question only. So question may come like, what will cause the asystole? So hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, hypocalcemia, like this they might ask. So hyperkalemia cause the asystole. Okay, asystole in ventricular dysarrhythmias. So in hyperkalemia, what is the changes in ECG? So how it will be looking? So tall T wave will be there. T wave will be like this. So in hyper, T wave will be high, tall T wave will be there, and QRS complex will be widened, and prolonged PR interval. So PR interval will be prolonged, and flat P waves, and you can see the P wave will be flat. Okay, and T wave will be like this. Okay, so PQRST. Okay, so QRS will be widened, so it will be like this, and tall T wave we can see here. Okay, in sodium, what will happen? In sodium, the sodium level decrease within the uses of with the uses of diuretics. So what we do in this, when we use the diuretics, so when we use the diuretics, it will increase the urine. Okay, so it will increase the urine frequency. So when patient will go on the urine, so what it will do, it will lead to the hyponatremia. Okay, all electrolyte will go out, so it will lead to the hyponatremia. So if patient is using diuretics, so patient may have a hyponatremia. So one more condition is there, how it can occur hyponatremia? Due to diuretics. So another, serum sodium level decrease in the heart failure. If heart failure is there, indicating water excess, so this will be a dilutional hyponatremia. So two things can be there. Hyponatremia, how it can be occur? Whether we are removing the sodium outside the body. So if sodium is going outside the body, then hyponatremia can occur. If sodium is there, but we are increasing the water level in the body, so in comparison, the sodium, water is more than the sodium. So what will be happen? Sodium is less than water, so it will be a dilutional hyponatremia. So in serum, what will be there? Water is greater than sodium, so there will be a dilutional hyponatremia. Okay, understood? Now coming to calcium. So what is the role of calcium here? So calcium hypocalcemia can cause ventricular dysarrhythmias, prolonged ST and QT intervals when hypocalcemia is there, ST and QT intervals will be prolonged, and cardiac arrest, it may lead to the cardiac arrest. When hypercalcemia is there, so there it was prolonged, so here it will be a shortened, and widened T wave will be there, and atrioventricular block will be there, AV block, and tachycardia will be there, or bradycardia it can also lead, and digitalis hypersensitivity and cardiac arrest also when hypercalcemia is there. Okay, so either here main question is come from the in hypocalcemia prolonged ST and QT intervals, here shortened ST segment and widened T waves. Okay, in hypercalcemia. Now coming to phosphorus level, what is this? Phosphorus levels should be interpreted with the calcium levels, because the kidney retain or excretes one electrolyte in an inverse relationship to the other. That means if it is removing the calcium, then phosphorus level will be increased. So we need to monitor the calcium level also, because the kidney retain or excrete one electrolyte in inverse relation to another. That means one is releasing outside, so one will be inside more. Okay, so we need to monitor it with the with respect to other like calcium. Phosphorus always with the calcium. Now coming to magnesium. So magnesium is also important. When low magnesium level can cause the ventricular tachycardia and fibrillation. So whenever magnesium level is less, it will lead to the ventricular tachycardia and ventricular fibrillation. And hypomagnesemia includes tall T waves and ST depression. So hypomagnesemia means T wave will be tall and ST depression will be there. And high magnesium level can cause the muscle weakness, hypotension and bradycardia. When magnesium level is high, so it will lead to the hypotension and bradycardia. In electrocardiogram, what will be happen? Prolonged PR interval and widened QRS complex. So in hypermagnesemia, what it will be there? PR interval will be prolonged and widened QRS complex. Here important point is given. Electrolyte and mineral imbalance can cause the cardiac electrical instability that can result in life-threatening dysarrhythmias, mainly potassium, okay, and magnesium. These two will cause the cardiac instability, and calcium also. So we need to monitor the cardiac monitoring we need to do. Now coming to blood urea nitrogen. Blood urea nitrogen, the blood urea nitrogen is elevated in the heart disorders. When heart disorders are there, it will be elevated. Why? That adversely affect the renal circulation. When heart disorders is there, it will affect the renal circulation. So what will be happen? So in body, that kidney will not function properly. So in body, BUN level will be increased, such as condition in heart failure and cardiogenic shock. When heart failure and cardiogenic shock is there, so renal perfusion will be decreased. Also in body, BUN level will be increased. Okay. Now coming to blood glucose. So in acute cardiac episodes can elevate the blood glucose level. So if acute cardiac episodes are there, it will elevate the blood glucose levels. Then coming to B-type natriuretic peptide, BNP. So BNP is released in response to atrial and ventricular stretches. When atrial and ventricular stretches are there, BNP will be released. So what it works? It serves as a marker for heart failure. So it is the indicator for heart failure. So its level should be less than 100 pg per ml or less than 100 nanogram per liter, picogram or nanogram. So if nanogram we are saying, we should say nanogram per liter. If we are saying pg picogram, that means pg per ml. The higher level and the more severe the heart failure. If it is high, so it is a more severe for the heart failure. Now coming to chest X-ray. So how we will do the chest X-ray we have seen. So it is the radiography of the chest, then determine the anatomical changes such as size, silhouette and position of the heart. So size, position and all this we will see by the chest X-ray. Intervention. So what we need to do, prepare the client. We have to prepare and explain the purpose and procedure, remove all jewelries, ensure the client is not pregnant. So this is very important. Whenever x-ray has been done, so client should not be pregnant. This we need to see. Okay, so it is contraindicated in the pregnant woman. Now coming to electrocardiography. So what is that electrocardiography? Electrocardiography, this is common non-invasive diagnostic test. So electrocardiography is a non-invasive test. Electrocardiography means ECG. So the test records electrical activity of the heart. So it records the electrical activity of heart. Is useful to detecting cardiac dysrhythmias and location and extent of MI and cardiac hypertrophy, or for evaluation of the effectiveness of cardiac medication. So cardiography, electrocardiography is for what? For location of MIST segment and all dysarrhythmias is there, any cardiac hypertrophy is there, and if whatever medication is going on, it is effective or not. So for this, for proper to assess the proper functioning of heart, we need the electrocardiography. So interventions. So determine the client is lie is still, breathe normally, and refrain from talking during the test. So it should be, the client should be lie still and breathing normally, and he should not talk to the during the test. Reassure the client that the electrical shock will not occur. So we have to reassure the client, we have to tell the client electrical shock will not be occur, and document any cardiac medication that client is taking. If client is taking any cardiac medication, that we need to what? Document. Okay, so basic electrocardiography, what are the things is there? So electrical activity speeds of 20 mm per second, it will be there. Each small square will be 0.04 seconds and large square will be 0.20. so 1 square is 0.04 small, so there will be a 5 small square will be there, so that will be total 0.20. so this 5 small square makes a one large box. Okay, so normal PR interval is the 0.1 to 0.2 seconds, and normal QRS complex duration is 0.04 to 0.1 second. So these are the important things. And QT interval normally lasts 0.3 to 0.4 second, but varies with the client's heart rate, age or gender. So these is the things we can see. So this is the main important point I told in this. Now coming to Holter monitoring. So what is Holter monitoring? It is also a non-invasive testing. So this is also a non-invasive test. The client wears the monitor and electrocardiograph tracing is recorded continuously over a period of 24 hours or more while the client performing his or her activity of daily living. So what is that? In that, one monitor will be there, so it will be attached to the client itself. In that, electrocardiography recording continuously over a period of 24 hours. So for 24 hours it will be record or more than it while the client performing his or her activities. So there will be a non-invasive monitor will be there. It will be attached to the client. So whatever client is doing, whether for 24 hours we can measure this, or more than 24 hours. So whatever, while client performing any activity, daily living, sleeping, eating, whatever he and she is doing, so it will record. Okay, it will record that all activities. Now monitor identify dysarrhythmias if they occur, evaluates effectiveness of anti-dysarrhythmic or pacematic therapy. If any dysarrhythmias it is occurring, so whatever medication is going on or any pacemaker therapy is there, so we need to evaluate its effectiveness, whether it is working or not, whether this medication is doing their its work is properly or not, whether it is effective or not. So this we need to assess. Intervention. So what are the intervention? Instruct the client resume normal daily activities. So we can instruct the client after attaching that Holter monitor, you can do the normal activity. Maintain a diary documenting activities. So when he is doing the activities, so he should maintain his diary, okay, what he is doing. Any symptoms that may develop for correlation with electrocardiography tracing. So and any symptom is occurring or developing when he is doing his activity, so it will be noted on the electrocardiography tracing, so he should write on his diary, okay, and he should inform the SCP. Instruct the client to avoid tub baths or shower because they will interfere with electrocardiographic record device. So we should ask the client should not take the tub bath or showers because they will interfere with the electrocardiographic recording device, okay. Now echocardiography. So what is echocardiography? It is also a non-invasive procedure. It is based on the principle of ultrasound and evaluates the structure and functional changes of the heart. So it is also a non-invasive procedure and based on the principle of ultrasound. So this is important point here. Non-invasive, work on the based of the ultrasound. So on which? For principle of ultrasound. So it can be asked electrocardiography work on the which principle? Ultrasound, MRI and all, endoscopy, like this they may ask. So it will be ultrasound. And if evaluate the structural and functional changes in the heart, so it will be evaluate the structural changes and functional changes in the heart. Used to detect valvular normalities. So valvular abnormalities will be there, it will detect that. And congenital heart defect, also any congenital heart defects are there, it will detect that. Wall motions, ejection fraction, so how much ejection fraction is there, that also, and cardiac functions also. One more important point comes here, transesophageal electrocardiography. Transesophageal electrocardiography may be performed. So transesophageal cardiography means, so we will do the cardiography through the esophagus to view the posterior structure of the heart. So if we want to see the posterior structure of the heart, so we will do the transesophageal electrocardiography. So what it will be there in this, we will in this, it is an invasive procedure. It is all transesophageal echocardiography. How it is? It is an invasive exam. For what that? For in this procedure, what we will do? Require preparation and care similar to the endoscopic procedure. So in this, what we will do? We will do with the help of some endoscope. Require preparation and care similar to the endoscopic procedure. So what we do in the endoscopic, same as we will do in this transesophageal. We will insert some scope like structure for echocardiography. So we will visualize the posterior heart, okay. So what care we give the endoscopic procedure, same we have to give in echocardiography also. In echocardiography, which echocardiography? Transesophageal echocardiography. So this is important point here. So if it is asked, transesophageal echocardiography is procedure invasive, non-invasive, both, like that it can be asked. So it is a invasive procedure. Intervention. Determine the client's ability to lie. So what we need to intervene? So we have to determine whether client may lie or not. Advise the client to lie still, breathe normally, refrain from talking during the test. So we should ask the client, you should lie still and you should not talk, and we should check the client is breathing normally or not, okay. So these are the things. Now coming to exercise electrocardiography testing, that is called stress test. So this is also a non-invasive test, and this is also a study of heart during activity. So we have to do the study of the heart during activity and detect, evaluates coronary artery disease. So how it will be? It is also known as the treadmill test. So treadmill testing is the most commonly used mode of stress testing. So it is also known as stress testing. If the client is unable to tolerate exercise, so client will be doing the exercise and intravenous infusion of dipyrimidine or dobutamine hydrochloride is given to dilate the coronary arteries. So it is mainly used for see the visualization of the to assess the function of coronary arteries. So when client is unable to perform that exercise, so what we will do, we will infuse intravenous infusion of dipyridamole and dobutamine hydrochloride. This we can do. So what it will do, it will dilute the coronary artery and stimulate the effect of exercise. So the client may need to be NPO. In this test client should be need to be on NPO for 3 to 6 hours pre-procedure. So pre-procedure he should be on NPO for 3 to 6 hours. If he is unable to do exercise, so we can administer dobutamine hydrochloride or dipyridamole. Okay. Pre-procedure, what we need to do, ensure that informed consent has been obtained if required. If it is required, it should be obtained. Okay. Encourage the adequate rest at the night before the procedure. Before the procedure, he should take the rest. This is important. Instruct the client having non-invasive test to eat a light meal. So he should eat the light meal before the test 1 to 2 hours before the procedure. So before the procedure 1 to 2 hours he should eat light meal. Now coming to another point, instruct the client avoid smoking, alcohol, caffeine before the procedure. So for treadmill test he should not drink the alcohol, he should avoid the smoking and caffeine before the procedure. Instruct the client, ask the healthcare provider about taking prescribed medication on the day of procedure. So we have to instruct the client to ask the healthcare provider about the medications before the procedure. In that, what will be theophylline products are usually withheld 12 hours. If a patient is taking theophylline, patient is on theophylline, it should be withheld before test at least 12 hours before the test. Whereas calcium channel blocker and beta blocker, should be withheld on the day of test. Allow the heart to increase during stress portion of the test. So theophylline should be withheld on the 12 hours before the test, and calcium channel blocker and beta blocker, it should be on the day of test. And instruct the client wear non-constrictive comfortable clothing and support rubber soled shoes. Okay. And instruct the client notify SCP if any chest pain, dizziness, shortness of breath occurring during the procedure. Patient is having any shortness of breath, dizziness is there during the procedure in treadmill, so he should inform the SCP. And post procedure, what we need to do, instruct the client avoid taking hot baths, shower for at least 1 to 2 hours. So he should avoid the hot bath shower for at least 1 to 12 hours. Okay, hot bath or hot shower he should avoid. Now coming to myocardial nuclear perfusion. What is myocardial nuclear perfusion? What we do in this, nuclear cardiology involves the use of nuclear techniques, scanning for cardiovascular assessment. So in this test, what we do, we will insert a radioisotopes. So that will scan the cardiovascular system. So in this, what we do, the most common tests include technetium pyrophosphate scanning. So what we use here, radioisotope, technetium pyrophosphate scanning, thallium imaging, and multi-gated cardiac blood pool imaging. And these tests can be evaluate cardiac motions and calculate the ejection fraction. So in nuclear cardiology, what we do, we will insert a radioisotope. We will see the with the radioisotope, technetium pyrophosphate we can use, thallium we can use, and multi-gated cardiac blood pool imaging we can see by this test. So these tests can be evaluate the cardiac motions. So how cardiac things is working, how heart is working, calculate the ejection, whether ejection fraction is adequate or not. So this we need to watch it. Pre-procedure, what we will do, ensure informed consent is obtained. So for this is informed consent should be taken. Inform the client a small amount of radioisotope will be injected. Okay, so in this we have to tell radioisotope will be injected and the radiation exposure and risk are minimal. So in this condition radiation exposure and risks are minimal. So in this test radiation exposure and risk are very minimal. Post procedure, what we need to vital signs, assess the injection site for bleeding and inform the client that fatigue is possible. So when after this nuclear imaging test client may have a fatigue, so this we should say the client. Now MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. So in this what will be, it is a non-invasive diagnostic test. It is a non-invasive diagnostic test that produce an image of heart or great vessels through the interaction of magnetic field, radio waves and atomic nuclei. So MRI, it is a non-invasive diagnostic test. What it does, it produces the image, it create an image of heart and its vessels and interaction of magnetic field. So there will be interaction in the magnetic field and radio waves and atomic nuclei. So there will be interaction between the magnetic field and radio waves. So in that condition what will be there, so they will create an image of the heart or great vessels in the MRI. It provides the information of chambers, so we can see the chambers, thickness and walls and ventricle function, how it is functioning, whether ventricles are functioning properly or not, whether blood flow is adequate or not, great vessels, whether coronary artery is having blocking and all. So these everything we can see in the MRI. So pre-procedure what we need to do, so evaluate the client presence of pacemaker or any implanted items that are present contraindicated to the test. So for MRI there should not be a pacemaker or any type of any metal, anything should not be implanted. If it is there, so MRI is contraindicated. So we should remove the all jewelries and watch, any metal things, metal hairpins and all these everything we should remove before the test. And inform the client she or he may experience the claustrophobia. He and she may feel the claustrophobia while this scanner. Okay, so this also we have to tell the client. So claustrophobia is fear of closed space. Electrophysiological studies. Electrophysiological study, what we will do in electrophysiological study, it is an invasive procedure which is programmed electrically stimulation of the heart. So we will stimulate the heart by electrically to cause the dysarrhythmias and conduction defects, assist in finding accurate diagnosis and aids determining the treatment. Okay, it is an invasive procedure in which programmed electrical stimulation of heart is induced to cause dysarrhythmias. Okay, so it is a invasive procedure or electrical stimulation will be there. In electron beam computed tomography, in EBCT what we will do, determine whether calcification is present. So this is very important. In EBCT what we do, whether calcification is present in the coronary arteries, whether calcium is deposited. So coronary artery calcium score is provided. So highest score higher than 400 requires intensive preventive treatment. If this CAC, coronary artery calcium, its score is greater than 400, then it requires intensive preventive treatment. So for this it's need a treatment. Okay, so these are the things. So here in this video we discuss this much only. In next video we will see the cardiac catheterization and all, so how we need to do. So I hope you would have understood these things. So these are the important points what we have discussed in this video. Please subscribe my channel if you have not subscribed this, and please share this video to others and like it. Thank you all of you. Thank you.